He was in there by himself, hidden in the dark with the door shut tight. I stood at a crossroads, knowing I could either turn back or step over a line I'd never be able to uncross. The house was eerily still, so quiet it gave me chills, like the kind of hush that makes your skin prickle. It felt as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, and I was right there with them, frozen in the moment. Barefoot in the hallway, I stared at his closed door, the faint, flickering light seeping out from underneath. The only sounds were the steady tick of the clock and the thud of my own heartbeat in my ears. I didn't go searching for trouble, I swear it. But when loneliness sinks deep enough, that heavy silence starts to feel like it's calling you forward. Night after night, he'd been shutting himself away in that room, no music playing, no TV blaring, just darkness swallowing him up. At first, I chalked it up to grief, convincing myself he just needed space to heal. But it dragged on too long, and that night, something felt off, different. I didn't knock or call out. I just stood there, my hand resting on the doorknob, stuck in place. I wish I could say I turned around and made the right choice. But honestly, I wasn't even sure what right meant anymore. How do you handle it when you see your own hollow ache mirrored in someone else's gaze? I wasn't just checking on him that night, I was searching for something, too, something I hadn't felt in ages. It wasn't about love or desire, but about craving a real connection, someone who actually saw me. Nobody warns you about that part, how it's not always about wanting someone in a fiery way. Sometimes, it's just about not wanting to feel like a ghost in your own life. I didn't mean for any of it to happen. But that night, something inside me shifted, and once you cross a line like that, there's no pretending you're the same person you were before. If you've ever felt like you're fading away in your own home, or stood at a doorway, torn between opening it and walking away, then maybe you'll get why I did what I did next. Stick with Heartfelt Tales Unfold so you don't miss the next chapter, because this story, it's messy, but it's honest. It's time I shared it. I'm 35, married, and on the surface, life looks fine, a nice house, a reliable car, a husband who brings home a good paycheck. But behind these walls, it's empty, like the heart's been carved out. My husband, Evan, thinks providing a paycheck counts as being present in our marriage. He's always jetting off somewhere or glued to his phone when he's home. Our talks are just logistics, bills, dinner plans, his next trip. It wasn't always like this. There was a time I felt like he chose me, like I mattered to him, but life ground us down. Or maybe he just stopped noticing me, stopped reaching for me like I was his wife. And I stopped asking why. I got used to the quiet, the empty side of the bed, the clink of dishes at a silent dinner. Then Jay, Evan's son from his first marriage, came to live with us. He's 18, tall, lean, and quiet. After his mom died in a sudden car accident, he'd been staying with his aunt. College brought him to our city, and Evan thought having him move in would save money. I didn't argue. It seemed like the decent thing to do. But the second he walked through the door, the air in the house shifted, like something new had stirred awake. Jay didn't say much. He was polite but kept his guard up, always with his headphones in, hood pulled up, eyes on the floor. I tried to connect, cooked meals I heard he liked, left little notes on the fridge, offered to drive him places. But he never asked for anything. Dinner was the same every night, Evan staring at his phone, Jay giving one-word answers, and me forcing a smile, pretending the silence wasn't choking me. Sometimes I'd watch them, father and son, sitting at the table but miles apart, and I'd wonder how a house could feel so full of people yet so hollow. I'd catch Jay moving through the hallway, quiet as a shadow, carrying a weight he didn't let anyone see. I told myself I got it, that maybe we were both mourning something in our own way. He'd lost his mom, and I'd lost what my marriage used to be. When Evan left for his 5-day work trips, I barely noticed he was gone anymore. But Jay. His presence lingered, subtle but undeniable. We'd bump into each other in the kitchen late at night, him in his hoodie, me in my robe. He'd give a quick nod, I'd flash a smile, and the moment would hang there, just a beat too long, stirring something I wasn't ready to put a name to. He started pitching in without me asking, doing his laundry, cleaning up his dishes, even offering to help with the groceries once. It was small stuff, but it felt like more than Evan had done for me in weeks. I hated that it meant something to me. I hated that I started noticing the low rumble in his voice when he said, "Thanks," or how he'd avoid my eyes but stay in the room a little longer than he needed to. I'd see him out on the back porch, sitting alone, staring into the distance, and I'd wonder what was going through his head. Did he feel as unseen as I did? I didn't see him as a kid anymore, not after that first month. Not after I noticed the sharp line of his jaw or the way his hands had grown strong, like a man's. I don't know exactly when it happened, but one night, I looked at him, and my breath hitched. I used to see Jay as a child, but something shifted that night, and I wasn't sure if it was him who'd changed or me. After that moment, after I felt that shift inside me, I tried to act like nothing was different. I kept cooking, folding laundry, pretending everything in the house was normal. But I started picking up on things I hadn't noticed before. Jay was spending more time locked in his room, skipping meals, keeping the door shut. Sometimes I'd hear faint noises from behind it, muffled voices, the soft glow of a video, or a low thump of music. But mostly, it was just quiet. At first, I let it go. He's 18, dealing with a lot. Grief hits hard, especially at night. But something about his withdrawal felt off. It wasn't just sadness, it was like he was dodging something, or hiding something. One night, on my way to bed, I passed his door. A faint glow slipped out from under it, barely there. I stopped, just for a moment, maybe a second too long. Then I heard it, not voices or music, but a steady, quick rhythm. My body froze. I knew exactly what it was. I didn't mean to pry, I swear. But before I could stop myself, I gave a soft knock, more instinct than intention. Inside, there was a frantic shuffle, then the sharp click of a laptop snapping shut. A pause. Then his voice came, steady but tinged with something else. "Yeah?" My throat went dry, my heart racing faster than it should have. "Hey, just checking if you need anything before I head to bed," I said, my voice shakier than I meant it to be. A beat. "I'm good," he replied, calm but with that hint of embarrassment, like he'd been caught. I didn't push, didn't say anything else. I just gave a nod he couldn't see and walked away. That moment, him in there, alone, doing what he was doing, it stuck with me. It should have faded, should have made me feel embarrassed or protective, like a mom would. But it didn't. It rattled me, not because of what he was doing, that's normal for an 18-year-old guy with a closed door. It was the way he looked at me after, like something had shifted between us. The next morning at breakfast, he didn't shy away from me. His eyes met mine for a brief moment, not with fear or shame, but with something deeper, something I couldn't quite put a name to. It was like he was silently asking me to grasp something we hadn't said out loud. And I did, or maybe I just wanted to, because I'd felt it too. That pause, that electric hum, that heavy quiet stretching between us. It wasn't just grief or loneliness lingering between me and Jay anymore. It was something new, something risky, something that felt all too real. I wish I could tell you that morning rolled by like any other, that I shrugged off the moment at his door and carried on with my routine. But the truth is, something in me had already started to shift, and once that starts, it's like trying to stop an avalanche. I sat across from Jay at the breakfast table, him crunching on his cereal, me clutching my coffee mug, and I couldn't stop replaying it, not what he was doing, but the way he looked at me. That steady, fleeting glance. That quiet, unspoken pull. It had been weeks since anyone touched me, not a kiss, not a hug, not even a brush of Evan's hand by mistake. Evan was always distracted, always exhausted, always somewhere else, in his head or on a plane. I used to try to get his attention in little ways, wearing a new dress, cooking his favorite dish, reaching for him in the dark. But eventually, I gave up, because nothing hurts more than reaching for someone who doesn't even notice. But Jay noticed. He saw me in the quiet moments, in the subtle shifts of breath and glances. I didn't want it to mean anything, not at first. But when you've been starving for so long, even a single look can feel like a banquet. That week, I found myself lingering a little too long outside his door when I knew he was up, starting pointless small talk just to hear his voice rumble. At night, I swapped my heavy robes for thinner ones, softer ones. I told myself it was just the spring heat, but deep down, I knew better. I wanted someone to see me, even if that someone was him. I'd walk to the kitchen, my footsteps loud enough for him to hear. I'd bend to grab something from a lower shelf, knowing exactly how it looked from where he stood. It was wrong, and I knew it. But that wrongness got all tangled up in a need I couldn't put words to. Curiosity started to simmer, slow and steady. What if he looked again? What if he wanted to? I kept telling myself I was just being kind, checking on him, helping him settle in, making sure he didn't feel alone. But my thoughts weren't kind, they were messy, desperate, dangerous. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling while Evan slept or pretended to, turned away from me. My mind would drift to the faint glow under Jay's door, the edge in his voice when I knocked, the flicker in his eyes at breakfast. I hated myself for thinking about it, but I couldn't stop. I'd think back to when I was younger, 16, 20, 23, always chasing approval from guys who dangled attention like it was gold. I thought I'd outgrown that marriage would ground me, make me whole. But I was still that same girl in so many ways, still running after something I could never quite catch. Jay didn't ask for any of this. He didn't do anything to pull me in, but he made me feel like I wasn't invisible. And that was enough to keep those thoughts burning. I told myself I was just being nice, but late at night, when I replayed that moment, the knock, the silence, the look, I knew it was more than that. It started small. His glances lingered a little longer. He stopped turning his eyes away so fast. At first, it was just in passing, when I walked into the room or handed him a plate. But then it shifted. One morning, I caught him staring as I poured my coffee, not casually, but like he was tracing every move I made. And I didn't stop him. I couldn't. That quiet, gentle attention felt louder than anything I'd felt in years. I tried to convince myself I was imagining it. But then the touches started. He'd brush past me in the hallway, light but deliberate. Once, when we both reached for the same dish, his hand grazed my waist, lingering just a moment too long. We didn't talk about it, didn't need to. The silence between us had grown thick, heavy with meaning. One night, Evan was off at another conference, leaving just me and Jay in the house. I suggested we watch a movie, thinking it was safe enough, popcorn, a blanket, some silly comedy we barely paid attention to. Halfway through, Jay scooted closer and laid his head in my lap, like it was the most normal thing in the world. My heart stopped. My hands froze, but then I looked down at him, his eyes closed, his breathing slow, and I couldn't stop myself. My fingers slid through his hair, soft and careful, then traced down to his shoulder, his chest, just barely touching. He didn't move, didn't say a word, just let me hover on that line between innocent and not. When I realized how far my hand had gone, I yanked it back, shame burning through me like wildfire. But when Jay sat up and looked at me, there was no blame in his eyes, no fear, just that same quiet understanding, that same silent "I see you" I'd felt before. I swore it wouldn't happen again, that I'd keep my distance. But the house was so still, and I was so tired of pretending I wasn't starving. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, still in my robe, still rattled from the night before. Jay was there, shirtless, leaning against the counter, pouring cereal like nothing had happened. He didn't cover up, didn't flinch. His eyes locked with mine, and for a moment, we both stood still. He said, "Morning," like he wasn't half naked, like my heart wasn't racing, like my hands hadn't touched him the night before. I turned away, but I could feel his gaze on me, lingering. After that, the tension between us was unbearable. Every moment felt charged, passing in the hallway, sitting at the table, even the silences were heavy. I'd catch him watching me from the corner of his eye, and sometimes I'd watch him too. It wasn't a game, wasn't playful. It was raw, real, like we both knew we were balancing on a ledge we couldn't step back from. I should have stopped it. I should have set boundaries, locked a door, said something, anything. But I didn't, because for the first time in years, I felt seen. And that kind of feeling, it's like a drug you can't quit. One evening, the power cut out, plunging the house into darkness. No hum from the fridge, no soft glow from the hallway, just shadows and a heavy quiet. I grabbed a candle, lit it, and padded barefoot into the living room, my breath caught in my throat. Jay was already there, perched on the couch, silent, like he'd been waiting for me. What unfolded in that darkness turned everything upside down. A storm had crept in outside, not loud or wild, but sneaky, with a low rumble far off and a flash of lightning streaking across the kitchen window. Then, just like that, the power blinked out. The buzz of the house's appliances fell silent, like the whole place let out a sigh. I stood there, barefoot, clutching my candle, barely daring to breathe. I drifted through the hallway, almost weightless, listening, not for danger, but for him. I found Jay in the living room, kneeling by the coffee table, striking a match to light a candle. The flame cast a soft glow across his face, making him look older, or maybe just more real. He turned, caught my eye, and for a long moment, we just held each other's gaze, no words, no pretending. I stepped closer. He stayed still, his eyes following me, candlelight flickering in them. I sat across from him, not too near, but not far enough to feel safe. Then he spoke, his voice low and careful. "This house feels so wrong when it's this quiet." I nodded, my throat tight. "I can't stand it either." He lit another candle, then one more, 3 tiny flames glowing between us. He looked up again. "It's not just the silence. It's like no one's really here, even when they're right in the room." I swallowed hard, his words hitting too close. "I feel that every single day." We sat there, wrapped in that raw truth, that shared emptiness. Rain started pattering against the windows, steady and soft. Jay leaned back against the couch, his legs stretched out, relaxed but heavy. "I think about my mom all the time," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My chest tightened as I looked at him. "She loved you so much," I murmured. He nodded, his eyes distant. "Yeah, but she wasn't happy. Not deep down." His gaze locked onto mine again. "You're not either." I opened my mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come, because he was right. Hearing it from him stung more than it would have from anyone else. He looked away, his voice quieter now. "Do you ever feel like people just see through you, like you're not even there?" I closed my eyes for a moment, the weight of it settling in. "Every day." Then it happened. He reached across the gap between us, his hand resting gently on mine, warm and steady. I didn't pull back, though I knew I should have. We both stared at that small touch, his thumb brushing slowly across my skin. I looked up, and so did he. There was something in his eyes, grief, longing, raw need. Our faces were too close, closer than they had any right to be. When our lips met, it wasn't rushed or frantic. It was slow, hesitant, like a question we didn't know how to voice. I felt his breath mingle with mine, his uncertainty, his pain. We pulled back for a moment, eyes locked, breathing hard. He whispered, "I'm so tired of feeling alone." And I didn't stop him. If you've ever stood at the edge of what's right and what's wrong, you'll know what happened next. Stick with Heartfelt Tales Unfold, there's more to this story you won't want to miss. The next morning was quiet, but not the kind that brings calm. It was heavy, uneasy, like the air itself was unsure of us. I didn't hear Jay in the kitchen, no creak of his door, no sound of the shower, no footsteps, just a silence that pressed in from every side. I lingered in my room longer than usual, fussing with laundry that was already folded, smoothing a bed that was already made. But my body hadn't forgotten, his breath, his voice, the weight of that moment we'd carved out, one we could never undo. I finally stepped into the hallway, steeling myself, but his door was shut. Maybe locked. I didn't knock. I couldn't bring myself to. I went through the day like a robot, brewing coffee, washing dishes no one had touched, opening windows to let in air I couldn't breathe. Around noon, the front door swung open. Evan was back, 2 days earlier than planned, muttering about cancelled meetings and a storm-delayed flight. My stomach churned, not just from the fear of being caught, but from the lie I was now carrying. Jay didn't leave his room, not even when Evan called out to him, trying to chat through the door. Jay stayed quiet, distant, cold. Evan raised an eyebrow, puzzled. "He okay?" I shrugged, mumbling something about college stress or the storm, saying he probably just needed space. I don't think Evan bought it, but he didn't push. That night at dinner, it was just Evan and me. Jay didn't show. Evan didn't seem too fussed, barely looking up from his phone as he ate, like nothing had shifted. But everything had. Everything. I couldn't eat, every bite felt like dust in my mouth. My skin felt too tight, my heart too loud. I told myself to act normal, to breathe, to exist. But my body remembered, and guilt doesn't always hit like a scream. Sometimes it's a quiet ache, a steady pulse that won't let go. Days went by. Jay kept to his room, dodging me. I dodged him too. The few times our paths crossed, he wouldn't meet my eyes. His shoulders were stiff, his jaw tight, and the spark that once hummed between us now felt like a raw, uncomfortable throb. I missed him, and I hated myself for that too. One night, late, past midnight, maybe, I passed by his door again. I heard it, not the flicker of a screen or footsteps, but crying, low and choked. I froze, my hand hovering over the doorknob, but I couldn't turn it. Instead, I whispered, so soft it might not have carried through the wood, "I'm sorry." I don't know if he heard. Maybe I hoped he didn't. But then, as I turned to leave, his door flew open. His eyes were red, streaked with tears, burning with anger. He looked at me like I'd torn something vital out of him. And before slamming the door shut, he said one thing: "You told me I wasn't alone." I couldn't sleep after that. His words hit me harder than the door he'd slammed in my face. "You told me I wasn't alone." And maybe that's what hurt most, because I meant it, in my own broken way. I really did. But what I gave him wasn't comfort. It was something else entirely. It wasn't stability or love, not the kind that mends what's broken. It was something fractured, cloaked in warmth and tangled in confusion. Now, the silence between Jay and me felt like it would never lift. I drifted through the house like a shadow, wiping down counters that were already spotless, folding clothes that didn't belong to me. Evan didn't see the change. He never does. To him, we were just fine. Some nights, lying next to him, I'd wonder if I should just confess, tear it open like a wound and let the truth spill out, shattering whatever fragile thing we had left. Other nights, I'd stare into the dark, picturing myself grabbing a bag, slipping out the front door, and vanishing. But I never did either. I was stuck, too scared to speak, too ashamed to run. What kind of woman am I, so desperate for affection that I'd take it from someone already hurting? That question clawed at me, louder than any storm I'd ever heard. Memories started creeping in, not of Jay, not of that night, but of me, younger, smaller, hiding behind doors, waiting for someone, anyone, to notice I was there. I thought of my dad, always gone, my mom, always furious. I learned early that love came with strings, and silence was safer than truth. So I got good at faking it, smiling through the hurt, laughing when I wanted to scream. Somewhere along the way, I started chasing the kind of love I grew up with, distant, cold, full of gaps. Jay wasn't just a boy. He was a mirror, showing me all the parts of myself I'd tried to bury for years. Maybe that's why it felt so dangerous. Was it love? I'm not sure. Maybe it was just two broken souls leaning into each other, hoping the pressure would feel like solace. One afternoon, while Evan was out, I sat down with a pen and paper, no distractions, no excuses. I wrote a letter, pouring out every moment, every mistake, every feeling I had no right to have. Tears fell as I wrote, the kind that leave you empty inside. When I was done, I sealed it in an envelope and tucked it into the drawer by our bed. It's still there. I didn't have the guts to give it to him, to break the fragile illusion we're still holding on to. but I couldn't toss it out either. It's the most honest thing I've ever written, and I'm too much of a coward to say it out loud. This is the part of my story that still haunts me, the part 1 replay when the house is still, the lights are dim, and I'm alone with answers I've never dared to voice. I don't know if I could have stopped it, or if I was ever strong enough to try. Sometimes I wonder if strength would have meant walking away or finally admitting how hollow I felt inside. It's hard to know, because when love gets blurry, when comfort and craving twist together, it's nearly impossible to tell if you're being wanted or just being seen. Have you ever been in a moment like that? Where right and wrong felt like shadows dancing in a room you couldn't leave? If you've ever been so lonely that you mistook attention for affection, if you've ever made a choice you couldn't take back just to feel something, please share in the comments. Tell me what you would have done. What should I have done? Your words mean something. Stories like this, buried in shame, need a place to breathe. If you're still here, still listening, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because the stories we carry deserve to be told, even the messy ones, even the ones we're scared to say out loud. Not every secret needs to stay hidden. But some are too dangerous to speak. What happened that night, what passed between Jay and me, didn't end in chaos or confrontation. There was no big confession, no visible fallout. But something in us shifted, quietly, forever. He never looked at me the same after that. And me? I couldn't face myself in the mirror without feeling the weight of it. Love isn't always pure or soft. Sometimes it grows from wounds, not warmth. Sometimes it's born in the darkest corners of loneliness, the kind that festers when no one sees you fading. And the loneliest hearts, they make the wildest choices. I don't know if I'll ever tell Evan, if Jay will ever forgive me, or if I'll ever forgive myself. But I carry it every day, not as a trophy, but as a bruise, a quiet reminder that the heart doesn't always know what heals and what destroys. Maybe forgiveness isn't something we get from others, but something we spend a lifetime trying to earn from ourselves.